Hello, this is Barbara Nicolato, Nick Snacks. Today I'm going to show you how to make a card that's holding a bookmark, perhaps for someone who loves to read. Let's look at the materials I'll be using for this project. First of all, I'll need a paper cutter. Also, some sort of scoreboard with bone folder. I'll be using Art Glitter Designer Dries Clear Adhesive, a ruler, and a pencil. I'm going to use Versamark Watermark Stamp Pad, an anti-static tool, white fine detail embossing powder, and a heat tool. I'll also be using a tassel. I've chosen white because it will coordinate with my project. A hole punch for the tassel to go through. A corner rounder, if you have one, or a fancy tag punch for the top of the bookmarker. The stamps I'm going to be using are from Lavinia. Lavinia 373 Fairy Dandelions, the larger of the two in this set. I'm going to also use Lavinia 166 Dandelions. This set comes with 3 different dandelion stamps. And for my inside sentiment, I chose Do More of Whatever Makes You Happy. It's by Cardio Stamps. It's a set called Wise Words. Rather than images, this stamp set is all sentiments. For my card, I've chosen a layering weight cardstock paper from Hero Arts called Iris. One side is iris, the other is white, so the inside of my card will be white. For my matte and decorative papers, I've chosen Dandelion Dreams paper pad by Creative Expressions. It's a gorgeous medium weight 8 by 8 inch paper. I'll be using a sheet of this with the dandelions. I'll also be using this. It's an ombre blue to purple shade. I'll be using it as a matte, and this one as the front of my bookmarker. The measurements for cutting the papers are listed below this video, and I'm also going to go through this with you now. I've started with my layering weight cardstock cut to 6 1/4 by 9 1/4 inches. On the longer side, I scored at 4 5/8 inches. Then I folded it and burnished it with my bone folder. My next sheet is 4 1/4 by 6 1/4 inches, and I scored it along the shorter side at 1/4 of an inch and 2 1/4 of an inch. Again, I fold and burnish it. The first mat is 4 3/8 of an inch by 6 inches. Eventually, it will be adhered to the front of the card. I have 2 more mats. One is 1 3/4 by 5 3/4 of an inch, and the second one, slightly longer, is 1 3/4 by 6 inches. Looking at my decorative papers, my first sheet is cut at 4 by 5 5/8 of an inch. The next one is 1 7/16 by 4 1/2. And finally, I have 1 7/16 by 5 3/4 inch. For the bookmark, I'm using the iris cardstock cut at 5 1/4 by 1 1/2 and the decorative paper cut at 1 1/4 by 5 1/8, and that will top it off. This marker can have rounded corners if you have a corner rounder punch. The top middle will be hole punched to hold the tassel. And if you have a tag puncher, you can get even fancier with your bookmarker. To assemble the card, I will start by taking the paper with the 2 score lines, and I will need to shave off 1/16 inch off the left side. This is the left. I'm going to turn it and put it in my cutter. Now 1/16 inch is a very small piece, so I'm going to line it up carefully and cut. Now, holding that same piece so that the 1/4 inch score is on the right side, I'm going to prepare to make a diagonal cut. I'm going to measure down 3 inches on the right side and make a tick mark. My cut will run diagonally from this point up to the top left side. I'll need to make sure that I have both points lined up properly in my cutter before cutting it. And this is the shape I end up with. Now, if you notice along my fold, you see some white. The paper broke and white shows through. It's time to take a moment to talk about solid core versus white core paper. White core paper is what I'm using here. The dye or color of the paper does not go all the way through the paper. Hence, the opposite side is white. So sometimes when you fold it, the white can show through. With solid core paper, the dye or color goes all the way through. So if you fold the paper and it breaks like this one did, you won't notice because it's all the solid color all the way through. That being said, I'm going to solve my problem by using one of my Copic markers, RV66 Raspberry, and I'm going to run a bead across the edge. Let's look at the mats for my card. I'm going to affix this to the front of my card with my art glitter glue. These 2 mats are going to be cut on the diagonal. So I'm going to start with the shorter one of the 2. And I'm going to measure down 1 1/4 inch from the left side down and make a small tick mark on my paper. And I'm going to measure down 2 1/2 inches on the right side and make another tick mark. And I will cut on the diagonal. On the 6-inch long mat, I will measure down 1 5/16 inch on the left side and place a tick mark. And on the right side, I'll measure down 1/8 of an inch and mark it. Using the paper cutter, I'm going to make a diagonal cut between the tick marks on both papers. I'm going to be very careful that I line them up on those marks before I make the cut. I will affix the shorter mat to the top of the iris card and the longer mat to the inside white part of the cardstock. Eventually, the diagonally cut part will be glued to the front of the main card, like so. Now let's grab the 2 decorative strips and prepare to cut them diagonally. Remember, the paper was ombre and that's why they appear different shades. On the smaller strip, I'm going to measure down 1/2 inch on the left side and mark it. Then on the right side, I'm going to measure down 1.5 inch and mark it. So I have the 2 points for the diagonal cut. On the larger strip, I'm going to measure down 1.25 inch on the left side and mark it. Then I'll measure down 3/8 of an inch on the right side and mark it. Now I'll make sure that I line up the 2 tick marks very carefully on the paper cutter before I cut. I'm going to do the same for the other strip as well. So this will be glued here, and this one will go on the inside. And of course, the larger sheet will go on the front of the card. At this point, I'm going to emboss the dandelion stamps onto the decorative papers before I assemble the card. The anti-static tool is rubbed on the paper first, so the embossing powder won't adhere to where it's not wanted. I apply the clear Versamark to the stamp and stamp the paper. Now I spoon the fine detailed white embossing powder over top of my paper, and it will stick to where the clear watermark ink was applied. If it has gone to unwanted areas, it can be brushed off before heat setting it. I'm going to proceed to the front decorative paper and decide where I'm going to place my dandelion stamps. Then I'm going to repeat the procedure. I'm going to use my anti-static tool. Then I will use the Versamark watermark ink on my stamps and stamp them onto my paper. Again, it's difficult to see where that ink is because it's clear. Now I'm ready to use the heat tool to set the embossing powder. It has to be hot, and I've got the volume of it turned off. When it's hot, you will notice that the powder actually starts to turn whiter. You'll see me applying the heat to both sides of the paper. And that's because sometimes the paper starts to warp towards you. So by heating the back, it starts to warp or bend in the opposite direction. So by heating it on both sides, I'm trying to keep the paper straight so that it doesn't warp either way. Now it's time to affix the decorative paper to my card. I apply glue to the back and then make sure it's centered as I set it in place. Midway down on the left, it's sticking up a little. Then it needs to be glued. Rather than try to squeeze the tip of my glue into that spot, there's a little trick. I take a little piece of scrap paper and I put some glue on the end of it, and then I take and slip this little piece of paper underneath the card, and that's how I apply the glue so that it's not messy. Then I'm going to push firmly down and it will stay affixed. I give all sides a quick check and it looks like I'm good to go. Now I'm going to work on the piece that's going to hold the bookmark. I apply the glue and then I affix it to the inside of the bookmark holder. But I notice that my top isn't exactly cut at the proper angle. And I can't live with that, so I'm going to take that off and cut it with the scissor at a better angle. I'm just going to snip a little off the end. To finish off this part that holds the bookmark, I'm going to apply glue to that little 1/4 of an inch tab, and I'm going to fold it over the back. Once that adheres, I'm going to just glue the entire back portion and glue it onto the front of the card. Now I'm going to put the bookmark together. Since I have the corner punch, I'm going to round off the bottom edges of both pieces of paper. Then I've decided to stamp and heat emboss another dandelion on the bookmark. So I'll follow the same procedure with the anti-static tool. I'll ink the stamp with the Versamark watermark ink. And after I stamp it, I will use fine detail white embossing powder and heat set it. After I glue the decorative paper onto my bookmark, it's time to add the finishing touches. I need to hole punch an opening at the top middle so the tassel can fit through. And since I have many different fancy tag punches, I've decided to use one of these for the top. So there's my finished card with a bookmark enclosed. What a great gift for someone that loves to read books. This one's going out to my daughter Anna. I'm going to use the Cardio Wise Words sentiment as a reminder to do more of whatever makes you happy. Well, that completes the bookmark card tutorial. And like I said, this is an A6 size. I have also made another one with the same theme in an A7 size. It's a little bigger and the measurements are a little different. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Please give us a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And if I've inspired you to make this card, please share it on our Facebook pages and tag me. I would love to see it. Please visit us at delbellosdesigns.com and have a great crafting day.